Welcome. Welcome to MVUU, where we practice open-hearted engagement, courageous love, and inspiring transformations such that we transform ourselves and our world through love. You are welcome here, online, in our Zoom room, or here in our sanctuary. This is our final day with the much-beloved Reverend Dr. Samantha Wilson, our interim. We welcome Reverend Matthew Von Crary beginning July 15th. Following our service today, there will be a celebration for Reverend Samantha. After the service, you will have about 10 to 15 minutes to gather some food and drink. A bell will sound, reminding you to return to this circle for our celebration. Yes, you will be allowed to eat in here. Reverend Samantha blessed it. Today's service is at the intersection of multiple important holidays. Father's Day, a day we reflect on, mourn, and celebrate our relationships to fathers and fatherhood, finding new understandings of what fathering means to each of us. Juneteenth, a day of celebration, education, and agitation, a celebration of a second Independence Day, a day of education and reckoning with our national history, and a day to ask what is left to do to create a deeper and truer racial equity in our world. Summer solstice, a celebration in our hemisphere of the longest day of the year and our slow return to darkness. And for us, Reverend Samantha's last day, a time when we say goodbye to Reverend Sam, pause with one another, and celebrate MVUU's new beginning with Reverend Matthew and our gathered community. To tie these stories and celebrations together, this service is a celebration of life through a celebration of the kinds of stories we must release to make new stories possible. In particular, having come to the end of our interim ministry and just beginning a new settled minister, we are asking what we need to let go of about our beliefs, about MVUU, our stories, and this church or churches past. Our stories about this minister or ministers past that would allow us the space for and dignity of a new beginning. Today, you are invited to consider the story you have about MVUU, about church, about ministry, about community. What story do you tell over and over again, possibly to yourself or possibly out loud to everyone else, that might need to be revisited or held more loosely to let a new story or new stories be possible? Join us in this spirit of openness, wonder, release, goodbye, and celebration. We light our chalice today with words from Father's Day 2 years ago when we were together at the beginning of the pandemic.
Poem for Sunday by Richard Blanco. Say we live on. Say we'll forget the masks that kept us from dying from the invisible, but say we won't ever forget the invisible masks we realized we had been wearing most of our lives, disguising ourselves from each other. Say we won't veil ourselves again, that our souls will keep breathing timelessly, that we won't return to clocking our lives with lists and appointments. Say we'll keep our days as errant as sun showers, impulsive as the stars falling. Say this isn't our end. Say I'll get to be as thrilled as a boy spinning again in my barber's chair. Tell him how I'd missed his winged scissors chirping away my shaggy hair, eclipsing my eyes as warm clouds of foam, the sharp love of his razor's tender strokes on my beard. Say I'll get more chances to say more than thanks, Shirley at the checkout line. Praise her turquoise jewelry, her son in photos taped to her register. Dare to ask about her throat cancer. Say this isn't her end. Say my mother's cloudy eyes won't die from the goodbye kiss I last gave her. Say that wasn't our final goodbye, nor will we be stranded behind a quarantine window trying to see our refracted faces beyond the glare. Read our lips. Press the warmth of our palms to the cold glass. Say I won't be kept from her bedside to listen to her last words that will have years to speak of the decades of our unspoken love that separated us. Say this isn't how we'll end. Say all the restaurant chairs will get back on their feet, that we'll all sit for another lifetime of savoring all we had never fully savored. The server as poet reciting flavors not on the menu. The candlelight flicker as appetizer. Friends, spicy gossip and rich, saucy laughter, sharing entrees of memories. No longer 6 feet apart, our beloved's lips as velvety as the wine, the dessert served sweet in their eyes. Say this is no one's end. Say my husband and I will keep on honing our home cooking together, find new recipes for love in the kitchen, our kisses and tears, while dicing onions, eggs cracking in tune to Aretha's croon, dancing as we heat up the oven. Say we'll never stop feasting on the taste of our stories, sweet or sour, but say our table will never be set for just one. Say neither of us dies. Many more cheers to our good health. Say we will never end. Say we'll all still take the time we once needed to walk alone and gently through our neighborhoods. Keep noticing the zen of anthills and sidewalk cracks, blossoming weeds, of yappy dogs and silent swing sets rusting in backyards, of neat hedges, hiding mansions and scruffy lawns of boarded up homes. Say we won't forget our seeing that every kind of life is a life worth living, worth saving. Say this is nobody's end. Or say this will be my end. Say the loving hands of a gloved, gowned angels risking their lives to save mine won't be able to keep me here. Say this is the last breath of my last poem, will of my last thoughts. I've witnessed massive swarms of fireflies grace my garden like never before. Drawn to the air, cleansed of our arrogant greed, their glow a flashback to the time before us, omen of earth without us, a reminder we're never immune to nature. I say this might be the end we've always needed to begin again. I say this may be the end to let us hope to heal, to evolve, reach the stars. Again, I'll say, heal, evolve, reach and become the stars that became us. Whether or not this is or is not our end.
Welcome to your interim graduation ceremony. Graduates, please stand. Oh, no one went for it? Jane, not even you? There we go. I always know I can count on Jane to participate in the sermon portion of the evening. This is a kind of graduation ceremony of sorts. This is the end of our journey together and the end of this piece of your work before you move forward into your next step. It's part memorial to what is ending and transforming and dying, and it's part celebration that there's this new thing that you begin again together with new leadership, with new people, with a new sense of community in a new space, and as we saw from our chalice lighting, in a new world. And I don't know about you, but when I was watching the chalice lighting, remembering what March 2020 and June 2020 felt like, and I was sitting here, I started crying. It was really hard, wasn't it? And here we are. Here you are. You did it. So my final words today are quite playful. And today's party and today's service is what I thought I heard Robin Bousel say was winging it from the heart. That your only job today is to be present. Your only job today is to be present and to not miss it. Don't miss it. I have one piece, a story that I want to share with you before we move through our ritual today. There's a story I haven't told you. Shocking. I've plumbed the depths here. I have a story about a time I went to Japan. So I was part of a delegation of peace activists who went to Japan as part of the ceremonies of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it was a group of us, an intentionally multi-class, multiracial, multi-faith delegation that were meeting peace activists all up and down the coasts and cities of Japan during these huge ceremonies. And I was doing it partly for my own growth, my own spirituality, my own generational healing, but I was also doing it for my master's degree fieldwork. So, as part of my master's degree fieldwork, there was a question I was asking. What makes a good memorial? What makes a good memorial? Now, to explore that, I was relying on some work by a Japanese ethicist. Her name is Yuki Mikamoto. And she wrote this book, Beyond the Mushroom Cloud, and was imagining what kinds of memorials of Hiroshima and Nagasaki actually are ethical. Now, what she compared were two memorials. One was the Peace Museum and Peace Park of Hiroshima, and the other one was the Yasukuni Shrine to the war dead of Japan. Now, in these two memorials, she was naming and experiencing them very differently, and so for my field work, I decided to walk in her footsteps and explore the same memorials, and this is what she imagined and what I resonated with. A good memorial has no conclusion. A good memorial has no conclusion. Meaning the dead do not get stuck as you think they are or always will be. The dead transform right along with the living. And you best have an ethical relationship with the dead if you want to feel love among the living. And what that requires is that a memorial is not a monologue. A memorial is a dialogue. And a good memorial is one that any person can come now, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, meet it and have a new experience and a new meaning. And when the meaning is stuck, when the meaning gets predetermined, then the memorial has lost something. The dead become it. And that is not what we long for. We long for a relationship with the dead. So this, in my head, is also the same reason why we do therapy. We do therapy because we have memorials in our head. We live with lifelong memorials of the things that happened to us. And when they get stuck, when they become monologues, you go to therapy. And when you go to therapy, what a good therapist or healer does is they loosen your grip on the story. And they make space in the palm of your hand for a new story to come alongside of it. Not requiring you to get rid of the old one at all. Just requiring you to make a little more room for something else. So this is your task at the end of our interim ministry, to not let it be conclusive, to hold loosely what we found together so that a new story comes right on in next to it. No therapy needed. Now, this piece about a memorial is how communities shape collective stories. So a memorial like the Hiroshima Peace Museum, wherein anyone could walk in and have this dialogue with the dead, no matter who you were. That happens in communities of your size, too. One of my favorite books, apparently in 2010, was this Blessing, Community, the Structure of Belonging by Peter Block. Does anyone know this one? Tom Bunch. This is why Tom Bunch and I are kin. This, if you look through it, you can read some young Samantha Wilson's Bible. This was so important to me in my own growing up as a community organizer. And what Peter Block was inspired by was someone more of you might know, Werner Erhard. Who took the EST training? Raise your hands. Just 2 of you. You know, what's so funny is the last 2 weeks I've talked to both of you, and both of you said you took it, and therefore I assumed everyone took it. And this is why you do real science. So this was a training that I'm sure some of you probably actually heard of in the 70s and the 80s that was helping people loosen the language and the stories they had about their own life to make a new story possible. And Peter Block was saying that this was possible for things like congregational life too. Now, when communities are at odds or are stuck, when they can't break free of a story that doesn't seem to support them, something is needed. Now, the usual antidote you might assume is a good strategic plan, more money, better leaders. Where are the volunteers? Admit it. Thank you, Debbie Guessman is nodding. Yes. Yeah, this is the reaching that we go for, but here's the jig is up. The jig is up is that what you need is a good question, a meaningful invitation, a naming of possibility, a requirement that each of you owns the very thing you complain about most. The belief that dissent is not an enemy of commitment. Dissent is a sign of real commitment. The idea that you make commitments that you actually mean and that you give them joyfully and freely. And then the promise that you have a gift that you might have been holding in exile, and you give it. Now, when you do that, something changes. So today, our ritual is an invitation to think about the story that you have about this place, perhaps the one you tell the most, that maybe your identity is even wedded to. And to identify the story is to identify the thing you complain about. And if you can't think of something that you've complained about, think about the last thing you just complained about. And ask yourself, what is my attachment to that story giving me? Now, usually the attachment gives us a sense that we're right. And when we feel like we're right, like we're the right ones, there's a little power that comes from that. But what is the cost? So we will shift into a series of questions. What is a story you most often hear yourself telling about Mountain Vista? And if you're here as a visitor, the thing you most often tell about church. What are the payoffs you receive from holding this story? And what is the attachment to the story costing you? And we'll sit just for a moment in some silence. I'm going to invite you to turn to the person next to you. I know, shocking. If you're not interested in talking to the person next to you, you can tell them no. That's okay. And we're going to share for about 3 minutes what your thoughts are in response to this question. And our Zoom viewers, we're going to put you in pairs. And if you don't want to be in pairs, you can use the chat box.
So happy Father's Day, everybody, dads. When my wife got pregnant, people told me that I should sing to the baby in the womb. That was good for the baby. So I started singing. And then when we learned our son's name, we learned that we had a son, and we named him Jesse. I went from generalized singing to writing a song for him. And this is that song. And I finished it on the day he was born, or at least that's my memory of things. And now, over the years, he's gotten a little embarrassed when I sing this song, but I have a plan or an expectation that one day he will appreciate this song. So, Jesse, can you hear me? It's your daddy. You're my son. I'll help you on the journey that you've only just begun. There are treasures to discover, like your brother and your mom. They'll hold you and they'll love you, keep you safe and make you warm. Jesse, I am near you, and I'll always stand by you and guide you toward the beauty. For the beauty is what's true. Heart to heart, hand in hand, from the start, that's the plan. Spirits part, then join again to roam the stars and walk the sand. Jesse, can you feel me? There is spirit everywhere. You're so near it. Can you hear it? It's like music in the air. Heart to heart, hand in hand, from the start, that's the plan. Spirits part, then join again to roam the stars, walk the sand. Jesse, can you hear me? It's your daddy.
So each of you on your chairs have little journals. And for those of you who are new, these journals are relics of times past. This emerged as a spiritual practice from the Reverend Ron Ferris, who was the minister of this congregation prior to my ministry with you. Now, you're going to write in these journals, and you are going to rip the page out. So make sure you have a clean page. And I'm going to give you a prompt. Now, I know for some, writing exercises are not your preferred method of doing anything. So I want to lean into that and say, imagine someone you really love, someone you really trust, who has the skill of cutting through your defenses. It might not be me. It might be a dear friend or a family member. And imagine that they were the one who asked you these questions. And they were leaning over a coffee table, and you were eating something delicious. And they asked you, tell me what decisions or conclusions you've reached that you want to loosen. What do you want to loosen about that community you're part of, that Mountain Vista thing? What thing do you think you understand about them? That thing you tell me you complain about a lot. What might be loosening about that? What might be changing about that? What do you want to change about that story? And then you tell them. And then they ask you the question, I wonder what's going to happen when you do that. What is possible? And with those loving eyes, we're going to take a few minutes with music from Chris and write the best you can. And for our Zoom viewers, we invite you to write in the chat.
the trick is to get the mask off without taking the hearing aids off. I think I won. My papas. Growing up in the South, I called my granddads Papa. One lived in the Ozark Mountains of Arkansas. He was a farmer. He had homesteaded 3 cross sections when he was a young man. He built 2 houses on a wonderful hill with a magnificent view. The first one burned down. And then he built a second one, which is one I remember. It didn't have any electricity or any water, but I loved it. I was the first girl grandchild. When my daddy and uncles went to World War II, my mom and I lived with Papa and his wife, Mama. These grandparents had raised 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls, on a rock-hard, sustainable farming property. He didn't have a car. He walked almost everywhere. I loved to walk with Papa. I loved walking in the woods most of all. No, that isn't true. I loved walking anywhere when it was just me and Papa, walking and talking. I'd almost have to run to keep up with his long strides. And while we went along like this, it felt like we were buddies discussing important things, like thinking about how somebody or how everybody could win instead of just being greedy, and how others wouldn't trust you if you didn't keep your word, and how it's okay to be scared, but count to 10 and think before you yell or cry. He would listen to me and agree when he could. When he couldn't, he'd kindly lead me to ponder before he helped me understand what he was teaching. He taught me that I could do more than I might think, that I could carry my life's load and help others as well, that I should not take someone else's opinion as the truth, but learn to think for myself. I felt important when I walked with my Papa, and I liked walking in the woods with him. Papa always kept me safe. One time, late on a crisp fall evening, Papa heard the dogs barking. He took his gun from the place and started towards the door. "Hear those dogs, girl? They've treed a possum. Listen to them. That's their possum bark. I'm going to get that varmint what's been helping itself to eggs and chicks from the barn." At the door, he turned. "You want to come along, Betty Ann?" "Oh, yeah, Papa," I said, and I threw on my jacket. My heart choked with happiness. He trusted me to remember all he had taught me. I knew to be quiet and not to be a scaredy cat. I grew up with the love and respect and understandings he gave me deep in my heart. When I was a young mother of 3 in Ventura, California, the news came that Papa was critically ill. I hadn't seen him for some years. Hearing he was ill made it difficult for me to swallow, and though I was grown up, tears kept pushing their way into my eyes faster than I could blink them away. My own children held me close. That night, I had a dream. My papa and I were walking on a trail, just like old times. We were surrounded by woods and green hills, something akin to the hills around that old farmstead house. And there were no buildings in my dream, though, just my papa and me, walking and talking. The trail seemed to get narrower and a little bit fainter as we walked along. Finally, Papa stopped, and I pulled up right beside him, looked up, and grinned. "Betty Ann," he said, "I want you to stay right here for a while. I'm going on ahead. I want you to follow me." "But Papa..." "Now, listen to me, girl. You've come with me many's the time, but this time you can't. You can go back yonder to the house, but you cannot follow me. Do you understand?" "Yes." He looked at me for a long minute, then turned and walked away. Ahead, the trail faded out completely. Soon the brush between the trees was so high I couldn't see my papa, and they hid him from me. I longed to follow him, but I had given my word that I wouldn't. I stayed looking at the spot where I last saw him. Then, a long ways in front of me, there was a movement. I saw him. He was walking up another hill. He didn't look back, he just walked on as he always had. Soon he was at the top. I could see him in a silhouette against the sky. Then his knees were behind the hill. And next, his torso was below the hill. And his shoulders vanished beneath the hill. And the top of his head disappeared somewhere beyond that hill. Though I squinted and searched as hard as I could, there was only the hill, just like I used to see it from the porch swing of the old house. The day following this dream, I got a call that my papa had died. There was so much sadness in me, I thought I couldn't hold it all. But I did. He had taught me how to carry life this way. As I've gotten older, I've learned the full meaning of Papa Battle's job concerning me. It was to love me, to have faith in me, to teach me about life, and to teach me how to die.
Inevitable. Thank you, Betty Ann. Grandma Betty over there. We have an opportunity here to do something my dad used to do. When something died in our family, my daddy used to build boxes. And when we would gather that box up, we would take it into our backyard and we'd make our backyard sacred by all the living and all the dying that we did in our family. Now, not quite the same, but a beloved person among you, Warren Ellis, has built you a box. And it has been lovingly decorated by Bob Grigsby. And I'm going to grab it so you can see it. This beautiful box, covered in stickers and paint from Bob, opens into your brilliant solstice sunshine here. And what this box is going to hold, can you guess? Papers. Thank you, Jim. What this box is going to hold is all of our conclusions that need loosening and our possibilities that need naming. And the beauty of it is that it's nice to loosen a conclusion with other people. So yours will not sit in here alone, but will be held by all the others. But before you do that, my invitation for you is to rip it out, to fold it in half, and then if you're willing, you can choose to keep it in your hand, but if you're willing, I want you to pass the paper at least 3 or 4 times among the people. So go ahead and pass your paper if you're willing. And then once it's made its way far enough from you that you feel free of it, I want you to read the paper you ended up with. Go ahead and read the paper you ended up with. And for those of you on Zoom, you probably saw each other's chats, but look at those chats one more time. And as you're reading, just know this is the work of community life. The mystery of the people next to you. And then here in a moment, you're going to lovingly place this other person's paper into this box. And this box is going to make its way through the audience, and you'll add the paper on top. And at some point, it's going to be a huge pile, and I don't know which side of the audience is going to get that. But isn't that the way it is? Isn't that the metaphor? To actually see what we create when we're together, what we're holding when we're together. So we're going to make this go around as Chris plays music, and you will tenderly put one in. So this next part of our time together involves us moving this box out back. This morning, just before service, the 3 of us were out there with a pickaxe in honor of Papas, because we thought Papas would appreciate that. The 3 of us were out there with a pickaxe, and we created a space in the wash behind this beautiful building. A space that is actually part of your home. And it is a throwaway of life, of water, of animals, and of humans. And it is a place here that belongs to you. What we'll do, for those of you who would like to join us, is we are going to take this box out the doors, down the steps, and into the wash. If you would like to join us, we're going to invite you to do so. To do that, you'll have to be able to go down some steps and to maneuver some stones. So if that doesn't seem like what your body is up to today, we encourage you to stay here, where Chris will be playing music and where you will actually see us doing it live on the TV screen. So you can participate vicariously. But before we do that, Hannah.
When Reverend Sam floated this idea, she asked me what I thought might happen from a hydrologist perspective. And the first thing I said was, I wouldn't count on that box to stay buried. There is a good chance that given enough rain, that wash will flow, and it might unearth the box and bring it downstream. And I was a little concerned that if it did that in a way that was really visible and created a visible mess, that we would get caught in an Alice's Restaurant scenario, where somebody came down and took 27 8x10 color glossy photos with circles and arrows and a paragraph on the, anyway, you know the story. And she said, no, that's fine. That's how things work. Things get resurfaced, and we're probably not gonna permanently be able to say goodbye to these. The other thing was getting caught up in a little bit of the email exchange. We were talking about burying these in the Ryuto. And then as a hydrologist, I was thinking, well, it's not really the Ryuto. What we've got back there is a little wash that flows into the Ryuto. So I was trying to look up the exact watershed, and I think that may be Casas Adobe's wash, although it's a little hard to tell. But here's the thing about a watershed. It's always a place of connection. And in our case, just to sort of name and observe the watershed that we're in and what it's connected to. We are in what I think is the Casas Adobe's watershed. In theory, and you all know how it is in the desert, you have to think about rivers in theory often, and in practice, you occasionally get a chance to see them. But in theory, it flows into the Ryuto, which then, in theory, again, flows into the beautiful Santa Cruz, which in theory flows north up into the Gila River, which then goes west and it joins up with the Colorado in the place where I grew up in Yuma. And then the Colorado, again, in theory, a little bit in practice. There is a little bit of water, although most of it is effluent release, that makes it down the Colorado and then into the estuary of the Sea of Cortez or the Gulf of California. And so while we're doing this, one thing that we can think of is that those places don't feel very connected. You don't really think of yourself on a living path towards the Gulf of California very much, but we are, and it is connected. There are times when there is enough water flowing that what happens here in our backyard has consequences down in the Gulf of California. So just think about that while we're doing this.
This morning was so much fun. I don't know, but I'll try to use some of my notes. So a few things I learned. One, even though I thought I had the right tools with wearing jeans and sneakers, I did not have long sleeves on. And I wasn't really prepared to be spending about an hour in the wash with a pickaxe, creating a clearing. But it was fun. One of the things that really came out when Reverend Samantha asked me to talk about this was, what's the story with digging a hole in the desert and creating a clearing? And the things that came up for me around that, one, it's really genuinely hard, and the work itself might not be fun. The work of actually going and hammering away and feeling, what is the point of this? This is not really gonna do much. We are spending an hour and there's barely a hole. Made me really question, not question, but I was just like, all right, well, I'll just keep going.
You can question.
I can question. I did question. One of the things that really came up, though, it helps to have a vision. And Reverend Samantha had a vision of us doing this, and then we got caught up in that vision. And it really reminded me when I was a kid, when we'd go in the woods and in upstate New York, and we'd find a clearing, and all of a sudden this was this fort, and it was just magical, and it was fun, and in our head there was kitchens, and we created something. So having this opportunity to be there and create a clearing, and through that clearing, dig a hole, and the work that went into it, and noticing like how similar is that to the work that we do in ourselves, that sometimes when we're hammering away and we feel like we're not getting anywhere, but what we're doing actually is creating space. Space for something to grow, space for movement to happen, space for connection. And there was connection, it was fun. The three of us were out there, kind of somewhat griping at times, but really we were just joking around, having fun, learning new things, and actually learning a lot of new things. I learned how to actually legitimately use a pickaxe. Apparently you let gravity do the work. Thank you, Hannah.
Don't try so hard, apparently.
Don't try so hard. But thank you for this opportunity. I really enjoyed it. I hope all of you have a chance to check it out, or at least see part of what we created and also feel that connection. And it's a beautiful space out there, and there's so much potential. So.
Thank you, thank you. This blessing of this box, and then we'll begin with those of you who want to come out and put the box in the ground with us. You'll follow us out there. You'll just be out there for a moment, and we'll be coming right back. So it'll be a very smooth walk, and then back. And those of you who stay here, stay in here and hold steady for us. Promise? Okay. We bless this box, this cavern of dreams, this cavern of sorrows, the threads of each story that have harmed us or hurt us, of conflicts here or in congregations past, in families past, in lovers past. Each harm leaves a scar like a watershed, moving us through it again. And yet, the river changes. Each monsoon season brings new life, new moves, new roads, new edges. Things that were once stuck shift. You have come to the end of this season of shifting. Each of you individually, in your own lives, through a season of pandemic. Each of us collectively, shifting, building, making a home, making friends, replenishing old ones, naming the harms, acknowledging the conflicts. And collectively here on the edge of a culture that aches for a people who know why they exist. This culture that we find ourselves in, this larger watershed that we find our own trickle into the stream, that would be moved if we thought ourselves capable of doing it. We come to the edge of this time together with this knowing there is nothing holding the flow of love back. And may it continue in all of your days to come. Let's begin. I want to hand this box over to someone in the room who identifies as a grandfather or a father who would be willing to go to the wash. Come on, Jim. And those of you who want to join us can join us.
So I'm going to share with you some words by the Reverend Dr. Mike Johnson that are titled Fatherly Words. Similar to our Mother's Day service, not everyone had a father who said these words or anything like them. So as I read these, I want to invite you, if you had that wonderful memory and you've heard these words before, to hold them and enjoy them being resaid. But if you didn't, I want you to take this opportunity to hear them from your own community, as we all say these words to each other, as we hear them from Sam. Wherever these words take you, know that you are together in this place and being held with us all. I love you just the way you are. I have confidence in you. You can achieve your goals. I will stand behind you. You can depend on me. I am proud of you. Stand up for yourself. Your opinions and feelings are important. I have faith in you.